I walk this beach alone, footprints in the mist, nowhere left to go, no lips left to kiss, lovers in the night, oh heaven anew.
So I've tried quite a bunch of fun techniques and skills in knitting, but one thing I've never done before is knit cables, at least not properly. I technically know how they work, and I have knitted some swatches that included cables because at some point I was thinking about making like a self-drafted balaclava that had honeycomb cables, I believe. So I did kind of learn how to do those from YouTube tutorials and stuff like that, but I've never like finished an actual object that had cables in it or followed a pattern with cables. So I thought that would be a cool thing to try this year, and one of my goals, I believe, at the beginning of the year was to knit a cable sweater. And a cable sweater is quite complicated. I don't know how to read these cable charts, so I thought maybe for the summer I'm going to start a little bit simpler, and for my first cable project I picked a really cool looking top. It is called 𝗙𝗚𝗡𝗏 by aegyoknit, and it is a pretty simple stockinette top that features a very prominent big cable down the middle of the top. And I'm hoping that even as a cable beginner I can figure out how to do that. It doesn't seem too complicated. I just got the pattern and I cast on for the first few rounds of it because that's just stockinette and I know how to do that one. I am about to do my first like cable, how do you call that cable? It's not a turn, like a crossover? Is that the word for it? I don't know the language yet. Apparently I need to watch some more tutorials. There is this like cable chart included in the pattern, but it also has written instructions, which I'm very happy about because I don't think I could really just figure it out from the chart, at least not with additional help, but this way I think it should be fairly easy to follow. I have a cable needle somewhere. I need to go look for it. I'm not sure if I actually should use that because basically everybody who I've heard talk about cables has said that they don't use a cable needle and they just kind of leave the stitches hanging there. But I guess for at least the first few times doing it, it might be helpful to have like that or a double pointed needle or just something to hold the stitches while I'm working on it. This is what it looks like so far. I'm using the Drops Cotton Merino in a black. I originally got this to do something else that did not work out, but well, now we're using it for this top, which it actually fits perfectly for as well because I've just measured my gauge and I am hitting gauge. I did not do a gauge swatch further than that. This is going to be the neck if you couldn't tell already. And this already has like a little bit of the cable. It's a pretty long like neck, and then I'll be working some increases for the shoulders over here. I have already decided to make changes to this as I always do. We'll see if they work out this time. It's like 50-50 I feel like. For this top, it doesn't include any back shaping. At least I noticed that when reading through it. And for me, I always feel like I could use more back shaping when doing what is in the pattern already. So I don't know if it'll be very comfortable for me to wear a top without back shaping. And it is pretty simple to include yourself, I guess. So I decided I want to do back shaping, and for that I had to move my markers around a little bit, or my beginning of round. I think for the top, the beginning of round is supposed to be like on this side of your shoulder, and then you work the cable in the front and the back and whatever. And I've just placed my beginning of round in the mid back, and this is where my cable is going to go. So it's going to be like all in the same spot. I'm just starting from somewhere else in the round. I'm hoping that's not going to cause any difficulties later on. I'm not really sure. I've skimmed through the pattern, so I kind of know what's happening, but I'm not 100% sure if this will work out. If it doesn't, I will just place the beginning of round marker where it is originally supposed to be once I start working the shoulder increases. But I think for this little neck section, it shouldn't be a problem as long as I am placing my cable in the correct spot, which I assume I am. So let's go look for my cable needle, and then I'll start doing cables, I guess.
I wistfully recall sunlight over me, a shadow gently fall. I can barely see any single thing through sun kissed chiffon, just a silhouette and smile, but then it's gone.
I got done with the little neck portion over here, and so far I've only had to do one of the cable crosses in the front. This is what it looks like. You can't really see super well on the black yarn bit because it's just one very large cable. I think it doesn't really matter usually for a cable knit. I would probably go for a lighter color, but I guess this cable is going to be visible either way. I feel like my cable needle is maybe a bit too small. I'm not quite sure if they have the same like sizing as normal needles, but this is more like maybe 2.5 or 3 millimeters than the 3.5 millimeter needle I'm working on here. I think you're supposed to use 4 for this pattern, are you? I'm not quite sure anymore, but I'm using 3.5 because that's what is going to give me the 20 stitch gauge. But this needle is smaller than that, definitely. And I feel like because of that, the stitches are already very tight anyway, because it's a large cable. So there's a lot of stitches that you're moving out of their spot. But because this needle is so small, I think that makes it even worse. It like makes it even tighter. So I'm not sure if this is a good way of doing it. It did work the first time I tried it now. So I'm gonna continue knitting. I'm gonna try the cable in the other direction, and then maybe if it is very tight again, I might go to my stash and find like a double pointed needle to use. I think that would be fine, so I could probably work with that. For my plan now, this is the complicated part where I'm making adjustments. I have put in a few stitch markers into my knitting, so these green ones are the front where the cable is going. I also have an unreasonable amount of ends attached to this somehow. So these green ones in the front here are where I'm doing my cable. These are going to stay in the entire time, I assume. And then I have this little one attached in the back here to count my rows since I did my last cable. And now I've added these like pink and purple ones to the side where I'm going to be working increases, because now there's increases work for the shoulder because your shoulder is a little bit wider than your neck. And this is the part where I'm making my changes to, or the part where I'm starting to work the short rows. I think from what I read in the pattern, it should work out. So this yellow marker here is my beginning of round, which is in the middle of the back. And if I was following the pattern here, my beginning of round marker would be over here where this purple stitch marker is. I'm gonna put mine here though, and then I'm still gonna work all of the increases that are in the pattern in the spot that they are in the pattern, which is just around these stitch markers that I put in, but I'm gonna do short rows at the same time. So instead of working the full round, I'm gonna pick a random spot over here where I think maybe like 3 stitches would be good. That's probably too little, maybe more like 2 stitches, so I can actually fit a few short rows in between these 2 markers. I'm not going to interfere with the cable in the front, obviously, so I'm just going to go 2 stitches after this second stitch marker, I guess, and then I'm gonna turn and go back and then do the same on the other side, and then I will be working back and forth like that with the instructions from the pattern for the increases. And hopefully that should raise the back a little bit so that the top is more comfortable and well-fitting. And I think after that, that will really be the most complicated part of this pattern. I've already read ahead a little bit and figured out that this like cable crossing thing you're always supposed to do on your right side row. So even when you're splitting for the front and back panel later on, this is always going to be on a knit row, and I don't have to really worry about it on the wrong side row. So I'm assuming after this part things should be pretty easy, but we'll see about that. I'll go figure out how to do my short rows now.
Hold me, starry in the day. Give me something I can keep. Oh, stay just this way until the sun sets forevermore.
I've gotten a good amount into this project, and I still somehow only did the cable in the front once, but I've been focusing on the back a lot, so I did my short rows. That worked out surprisingly well. I didn't have to go back. It was a lot of thinking because the increases aren't always in the same spot. So I showed this little saddle that is created by these 2 stitch markers I had earlier, and the increases aren't always work right next to that. They're like moving around a little bit. I'm not quite sure if there's a purpose to that other than the way it looks. I think when you look at the sample picture, you can like very slightly see where the increases are done. I don't know if that's like a design choice or if there's any purpose to doing that. I've worked a few tops with this construction and I've never seen that anywhere else, so I'm not sure. Maybe it's better for the fabric in some way. I don't know. I just followed the pattern with that, but it worked out well. I did my short rows, I had the correct amount of stitches, and now it looks like this, and you can't see anything at all. Is there a better way to show this? I'm not sure. And then I just put my front stitches on hold and started working on the back, which is why I'm still not really doing the cabling, because normally if you're just following the pattern, you would be doing the cable still while you're doing these shoulder increases, but for the most part of these shoulder increases, I was doing my short rows. So I just wasn't working these front stitches at all, and then I did a few increase rows where I was working them, but they just happened to not be the ones where I need to do the cabling. So, well, now they're on hold and I'm doing the back. The back is very boring. It is just stockinette, and you're doing like an edge stitch to later pick up for, I think, an I-cord that you're working around the armhole which I'm very happy about. I've noticed with now having worked a few of these types of tops that have very little finishings, or these like easy summer tops, that I don't really mind if there's no finishings for the cast on or for the bind off. That looks fine to me generally, but the side of my knitting, just to me at least, looks very wobbly and uneven, and I don't really like the way an unfinished armhole looks there. So for this top, for example, I was also working an integrated I-cord, which I guess I could do here somehow, but then I still have to figure out what to do under the arm. So I thought I might as well just follow the pattern and pick up for the I-cord later. It is never as annoying to work as I think it will be before I start, so I'm hoping that should be fine. I'm almost done with the back panel already. I've spent a lot of time today just doing this. This is all progress from one day, by the way. I started at like 2 this afternoon and now it's like 8, I guess, and this is where I'm at. I'll be continuing on this tonight, I guess, so we'll see if I pick the front back up and if I get to do one more cable round. I think the next time I work the cable I have to put the stitches in the back, and then I will be alternating between putting them to the front and to the back. I don't know if that makes sense. I need to learn a little bit more about cables and how to talk about them. I don't know what I'm doing, but it looks cool so far. Also a little bit like I just made a mistake because I only did it once, but I hope it will look cool at some point. Well, let me finish the back panel and then I'll worry about the cable.
I never want to go where I was before. No one needs to know. No one needs to force any single thing. Let the summer be taken out of time, so I'll have you.
I was really locked in yesterday and I managed to finish the entire back panel, so this is what it looks like now. I also picked the front back up and I did a few rows on that, but not really a ton. For the back, you just work it back and forth in stockinette for the most part, and then there's a few increases for the armhole over here. And I find the increases in this pattern very interesting because I've never seen them done that way before, and I can't quite figure out why they are done this way. So usually when I read through a pattern, I kind of know like why the designer was making which choices with their designing. And for this one, I'm not quite sure. I've tried to do some research and figure out what's happening here, but for the shoulder increases here, as well as for the armhole increases that I've worked for the back panel, you're not always placing them in the same spots. So you're doing your first increase and then you're marking where that was, and then you keep shifting your increase over one stitch until at some point the sequence loops back and you're placing the next increase where the first one was, and then you just do that a few times over. And I'm not quite sure what the point of that is, if that's just a design choice because of the way it looks, like you can very slightly see where the increases are placed, I guess, and maybe that's just done because it looks cooler. I was able to figure out that it was apparently a more common thing in older patterns because the way that increases used to be done was different and they just looked a little bit like bulkier and more noticeable, so it would be better to place them apart a little bit so that you wouldn't have this like weird looking line that almost looks like a seam. But for these like make one right and make one left increases that are most common now and that are also used in this pattern, that's not really necessary. So I'm not sure, but I think it's a cool detail. Maybe that's like a signature move of the designer. I'm not sure. This is the first one of her patterns that I'm knitting, although I have favorited many of them, I actually think. She has a lot of cool designs, so I'd be interested in doing some more of her patterns in the future. I just thought this was a noteworthy little detail that I can't quite figure out why it's happening, but I enjoy it. For the front, I managed to finally do the second cable crossover, so the one in the other direction. I guess the right cable is what you call it, and this is what it ended up looking like so far. And I've also done a third one already. For the first and second one, I used my cable needle here. This is the only one I have, but it's worked out okay. And then for the third one now, I've tried doing a double pointed needle that is a little bit thicker. And I found this a bit easier because the stitches didn't get quite as tight as on this tiny little cable needle. So I think I'll be moving forward with that one. I don't think for this pattern it's really possible to do what I've seen most people do, where they will just slip the stitches off the needle and then leave them there and slip them back on later. I think that's like the cable is too big for that. It's too many stitches for them to just hang there because you're distorting the fabric quite heavily when you're doing the cable. So I think you do need some kind of a double pointed needle or cable needle to put your stitches on. I'm also hoping I'm doing the cable tension correctly. I've been trying to just pull my stitches as tight as I would pull them if they were a normal stockinette stitch. And I think it's like working out, but I was a little bit worried about it because, as I said, you're distorting the fabric quite significantly, and I felt like maybe I should like not knit as tightly or give it some space, but I think from what it looks like, I'm happy with the results so far. So I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing and finish this front panel and then connect them around, and we'll see if it fits me. It very much looks like it, but I'm also excited to go try it on, and from then on out, I assume the body is not going to be overly complicated. I worked on this for 2 more evenings now. I wanted to show it to you yesterday, but it wasn't quite long enough to be on the internet yet. But for the first night, I just worked some increases over here for the front panel. They're the same as for the back panel, and then I connected under the arm with some extra custom stitches, and now the rest of the top is just worked in the round with this occasional cable in the front, just socking it in the round, which is going very quickly. I did like 3 pattern repeats of this cable, I think, after connecting in the round so far, and I think I'm going to do 3 more, and then I should have like a full-length top. But so far I'm really happy with it. It looks very flattering. I'm hoping that when I add the I-cord at the armhole later on, it's gonna not curl inwards as much, because right now it kind of does that, and I feel like it could use a little more like width over here. I think that would look a bit nicer than if I just leave it like this. So I'm hoping that should fix it. It doesn't really do it as much for the back. I'm not sure why that is, but we are on the final stretch with this now, which means it's going to be a super quick project. I'm really excited to wear this and get it done. So let's finish the body.
Always to be my love. Always to be my love. Always to be my.
So that was a very quick project that took me under a week to finish, and I was really happy with my knitting experience. I'm really happy with my finished object. That was just genuinely enjoyable throughout. For my finished object, I think it fits me really well. It looks really flattering. I think this is going to be very easy to dress up if I want to make it more elegant looking, but also I can just wear it as a basic with my like normal everyday clothes, and it will look nice. So I'm really enjoying this so far. For my experience with the pattern, it was very clearly written. The instructions were easy to follow. I don't have major complaints about it. The only thing I am not sure about is the back shaping issue still. I think at the point where I decided to include it, it was more of like a personal preference of me saying I just want to have the back shaping, but I can't understand if it's not included, if most people like wouldn't care about it. But now that I'm wearing this, I find that the collar comes pretty high up, and I think it would genuinely bother me if I hadn't done the back shaping. So if you're somebody who also usually feels like they need the back shaping, I would recommend doing that change, like making the modification to include it. I think the pattern could have used it just for everybody, to be honest. I don't know why the designer decided to not include it. Maybe it was just to keep it a little bit easier, especially because, as I was describing earlier, the increases are all like not done in the same spot, or like kind of done in the same spot, but like shifting over. So if you also have to do them on the wrong side, there's a lot of things you have to think about, like how to do the increase on the wrong side and then where to do it. So I can kind of understand why somebody would decide to not include the back shaping in the pattern, but I also feel like the pattern rating isn't beginner friendly enough to assume that somebody who would knit this couldn't pull that off. Like, it's not written in a difficult way, I would say, but compared to most other modern patterns, this is like not very hand-holdy. This is giving you like clearly the instructions, but not any more than you need, not to like great detail. For the cable, it's kind of just saying like knit this every X rows, and then do the rest of the instructions like this, but it's like not like spelling every step out for you. So I feel like somebody who can easily work with instructions like that could do the back shaping. But again, maybe that's just me speaking from like my personal preference of really wanting the back shaping included. Regardless, I'm happy I made that change. I think the only thing I would change if I were to knit this again is that I would knit an integrated I-cord over here, just because it's easier to do that than to pick up the stitches and then knit the I-cord at the end. And I also feel like it curls a little bit less. I've blocked this now, and that has mostly solved the curling issues around the edges here, but it's not completely gone. And I feel like it would be a little bit better if it was an integrated I-cord. I just think that's a bit simpler to knit. But well, if I ever make this again, I'm going to do that. But obviously that's like not a critique of the pattern. You can do that either way. For my experience with the yarn, I was generally happy with it. I would work with it again, especially for like sweaters and stuff. I think this would be a good yarn for me. I like that it's slightly stretchy, even though it has cotton in it. I think most cotton blends I've worked with, they are very stiff. They have like more cotton type of properties than properties of what they are mixed with. and this is like half merino, and it's not stretchy, but I think you can kind of see when I pull on it that it has a little bit of give, which is nice to work with. It's a tiny bit slippery, but I would say appropriately so. That's just the merino, I guess, and it's not like falling off your needles type of slippery. What I didn't enjoy about this yarn is that it is kind of splitty, and once you've split it, it never goes back to its original shape. So especially for the I-cord, where I was like shifting stitches from one needle to another a lot, I sometimes like didn't quite get the thread correctly and had like parts of it sticking out, and then it was like impossible to get it to look like neat. So that was a bit annoying, but it's fine. If you're not like knitting I-cord, I think you should be able to deal with that. And then the other thing that bothered me a tiny bit is that this is losing fibers like crazy. Like you put this down and there's black fluff left when you pick it up. That was annoying when winding it up, and it was also annoying just working with it and like breathing it in. I generally felt like I couldn't breathe by the end of working with this for a few hours. So not ideal, but I think that's something I can deal with because I did genuinely enjoy all of the other properties of this yarn. I think that was like my first proper summer knit and my first proper cable knit, so that's cool. I would recommend, and well, I'll show you some pictures of what it looks like.
I walk this beach alone, footprints in the mist, nowhere left to go, no lips left to kiss, lovers in the night. Oh, heaven I knew, and I